The content of this episode may not be suitable for some audiences. Listener's discretion is advised. Welcome to the Place of Rest, where our aim is to give you language that helps you displace the growing confusion, chaos, and dis-ease of our times. My name is Jonathan Boyce, and it's my pleasure to bring to you today's episode. Virginia talks with Andy Falco Jimenez. Andy is a retired police officer with the Anaheim Police Department, a canine handler, a canine trainer, a sex crimes detective, and an author. We hope you enjoy today's conversation.
I thought I'd tell you that the drive for me is I fearlessly invite people into this place of rest, Andy, and I have for so many, many years, because this is unfailing love that in the course of history a father gave his son. Today, we witnessed what happens when a father gives his son. As he held his boy, the sheriff held his boy in his arms, waiting for the police to come. And as Charlie gave his life, no greater love has a man, right, than that he would give up his life for his friends. And in so many ways, I know Charlie was about that. And he lived fearless because he lived free. And what gave him the boldness and the courage was this knowledge of the truth. And in these moments of crisis, we call on our first responders, and you have a big history, you have a big story. You're a first responder, you're married to our keynote speaker, and a first responder to 5 sitting presidents. And I just wanted our listening audience to hear from you, but I had no idea it would be under these circumstances. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
I decided anyway that the narrative would be America will step into a place of rest and will recover, because this form of civil government was designed to protect the civil liberties of people. And just because they're under assault right now, the most fundamental civil liberty is speech, right? But just because it's under assault right now, I realize that I feel emboldened by everything that's happening, because the promise of rest and the gift of freedom came from the greatest leader that ever lived. That was Jesus Christ. And I have followed those words, and I have investigated the science and the philosophy and the theology, and in the context of something as simple and accessible as our anatomy, to prove that in fact those things are true. Watching that father embrace his son and waiting for the police to arrive. Wow. This is unfailing love, is a pursuit of justice. And you were, like I said, one of our first responders. And I want to thank you, because I can't think of a better person to discuss that with. That was God's gift to me today. No, Virginia, what's happening is unfailing love, and you're going to watch it unfold in the months to come. So thank you for being here with me.
Thank you. That's beautiful. It's been a wild couple days. There's so much happening in our school district that is just maddening. And then you see the results of taking children's minds and just wanting to take God out of our schools and out of their hearts, and using such language and lies about what we know to be true. And what we saw with Charlie Kirk was a result of that. A man that's only 21, 22 years old, that wasn't like that. They said this is a recent change in his personality of being radicalized. And the only way that he could have been radicalized is through media, through social media, through news media. And it just shifted his mind.
Tell us a little bit about what you learned today. I know you listen and hear these things with different ears because you're a first responder. You guys are the first people that show up to these kinds of crazy things.
Yeah.
What did they say? I haven't heard the latest.
Yeah, not much more than what you just shared. And that's the thing that kind of gets me is that you can tell that he comes from a family that has morals. The dad knew he had to turn his son in. And I heard through President Trump earlier, he said that even a pastor or minister was involved. And so this kid was surrounded by believers, by people that had morals, and yet they still got him. The devil still reached in there. And, it wasn't recently that this is so obvious, but one of the pastors that I follow, it may have been our own pastor in our own church, said, don't believe just because your child, son or daughter, grew up in a Christian house that they are born again or that they're believers. They have to turn around and give their lives to Jesus Christ. And until they do that, they're not safe. And just see that in this boy, whatever happened to him.
Well, I think you're addressing something really important. And this morning, as I was writing, it occurred to me, I literally heard the words, Virginia, be still. Nothing's changed. I'm still on the throne. And at the end of the day, what you witnessed this morning, this is unfailing love. And the words that came to my mind are at the heart of R.E.S.T. and why our primary aim is to help people step into wholeness, yes, by displacing confusion, chaos, and dis-ease. And what managed to get to the boy and is managing to infiltrate the thinking and the mind and the heart of a generation are lies. It occurred to me that unfailing love is to have the strength, courage, and commitment to displace the growing confusion, chaos, and dis-ease of the age, to speak up against arguments and ideas that rise up against the knowledge of the truth. And what is truth? These things are a universal thing common to all of us. The self-evident truth, the things that are obvious to us, and the natural affection, and that is experienced in measure by all of us. So at the end of the day, truth is all that expands life, that takes into account the frailty of our human condition, of the human condition, all that expands light, life, love, liberty, law. So at the end of the day, truth is all that expands life, not diminishes it. And even with a fundamental knowledge of these things that are universal, there's nothing I said that's controversial. Mm-hmm. Only man becomes a law unto himself and becomes a center of justice, or he understands that there's universal, there's something bigger than all of us. And we either, to who or what are we surrendering to? That's the real question. But I think we need to find ways to really identify the thing that is afflicting our homes, our families, our children, that's afflicting us. Were it not for the kind of work that I do, Andy, I don't know that I would have been able to flush that out.
Yeah, you're doing great work.
I think we are all doing great work because our Father turned over his Son, just like this Father had to do today. Charlie knew he was turning over his life every single day to the providential care of God. And I think what you and I do and what Hedia does, and I think what we can continue to do in honor of truth, is to turn over our lives and to show up with conviction to be truth bearers for this next generation, because this sweet boy with his beautiful family, he's a son, he's a brother. He was taken captive by ideas and arguments that rose up against the knowledge of truth. And they were persuasive, but he didn't know that his very soul was being sucked out of him. And he began to do what? Lose his mind. We talk about mental illness quite a bit. And as a first responder, I know you have a big story. You have faced what dealing with mental illness day in and day out did in your personal life. You can see how a person can lose their mind. What do you think of when I say what I just did? And put that into context of your own story, because you know a little something about facing evil day in and day out and how it causes you to lose your mind.
Well, what you said just gave me this thought that mental illness is contagious.
Yes. Yes.
As a sex crimes detective, I was interviewing a a suspect in a child molestation, a 6-year-old victim of a man who grew up in the forests of the Amazon. And as I was interviewing him and getting a confession, he told me more that he did to the young victim than what we even knew that he had done. And it began to sicken me. Understand that I'm in this little tiny closet of a room with a camera and a small desk in between us and a translator because he didn't speak English. But he had been given refuge and a place to live in the pastor of the church that he was working in their home where this 6-year-old victim lived, this young girl. And as he was telling me what he had done, I was growing more and more angry. But as a detective in an interview, of course, you can't show the anger. I'm talking nicely to him and, just encouraging him, to get it off his chest. And I wasn't Christian at the time. And as he's telling me what he did, I got to a really extreme height of anger and disgust and was in my head thinking, I don't know how much longer I can do this particular job of being a detective in this unit. Then when I asked him why he did this, he said, well, that's how I grew up. And it's normal for us where I grew up in this tribe in the middle of the rainforest that the men have sex with the young children. So that's the first sign that he caught what was going around in that particular tribe. And then he brought it to the United States. Him telling me that story would lead to me eventually having a breakdown because it was the first time that I really had difficulty dealing with a situation, which then turned into a sort of mental illness with me. And when you were talking, I was just thinking that it was handed from the people in his tribe to that suspect. Yeah. And me in this tiny room with him, he infected me with a mental illness, not the same one, thank God, but one that affected me and changed my life. It changed my career. I eventually ended up being retired from the police department after another head injury, which was a concussion in a car crash. But the combination of all those things of being infected by some of the trauma, you just got to guard yourself. I'd wish I'd been a Christian. I would have had the protection, the shield and the armor and the belt of righteousness to protect me from that contagion. I truly believe that. Because it wasn't until, because I'd suffered from it for a while, I'd had vertigo and then I would get lost. I'd forget where I was. I began drinking heavily. And it wasn't until I became born again, went to my knees and repented and asked God for his forgiveness. And he indwelled himself inside me that regardless of what the psychiatrist, as far as medication, tried to give me, hypnosis, other treatments, that seemed to help for a short period of time. And I really didn't get into the narcotics. I try not to take any kind of medicines like that. I know they can benefit, but I also know the side effect of taking that medication. So I didn't take it. But it wasn't until that moment that I repented and asked God for his forgiveness that he showed himself to me, physically showed himself to me and stood in front of me. And relieved me of that mental illness I was going through. Since then, I've not had any issues other than the occasional anxiety that would come upon me. But again, I don't know exactly when that happened, how it came about, but I would get over it pretty quickly once I began to pray and get into the word. That's the healer. God heals.
And this happened in a bed of suicide, didn't it?
Well, I had that earlier.
This was earlier.
Yeah, that was when I was 22 as a cop, and when all this was happening, I was in my late 20s and early 30s. So that obviously was a sign that something was going on.
But how many years passed from that first affliction to this incident you just mentioned?
Gosh, I'd say about 12 years, 13
years.
Yeah,
that's about right. It doesn't have to take us this long to get help.
Yeah.
To realize
I was in the church for 20 years before I actually repented and asked for forgiveness. I'd go to church on Sunday, but wasn't born again. I would lead men's Bible studies. I would speak at retreats for men in the church, but I wasn't born again. I had never repented up to that point, asked for forgiveness, and accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior.
Mark your calendars for a night of impact at the Rest and Recover America Gala on Thursday, October 9, 2025, at the stunning Villa Tortorea. Join us for an unforgettable evening, a gala celebrating our first responder community and supporting the efforts of Rest and Recover America as they provide life-changing mental health services to first responders. There will be a dinner, special guest speakers, including our keynote speaker, Hedia Miramati Falco, and a silent auction. Tickets are limited, so don't wait. Secure your spot today at the link in the show notes. Together, with your support, we can directly strengthen and expand our mission to restore well-being and renew capacity to thrive for our first responders. Join us for a night of hope, celebration, and giving back. Get your tickets now.
What specifically brought you to your knees?
Myself. My second divorce, a single dad to 5 children. I was going to church, but that's the only time that I was actually doing anything as far as being a Christian. The rest of the week, 6 days a week, even 6.5 days a week, once I'd leave church, we would go watch a football game, some bar, or, womanizing, or doing anything but follow what God wanted from me. And then I think another relationship had just broken up, and I said, I'm done. I'm done. And in my home, I remember going to my knees and repenting. And I'd heard about it, but had never done it. I never asked for forgiveness because I thought I could always control the problems I was going through. I thought it was something that I could fix, but it was a moment that I gave it all to God. And then a couple of weeks later, I was at an event in Utah that was not a religious event, but on the Sunday following the event, they said, hey, we're inviting anybody that's, wants to come. We're going to be doing worship in this other conference room. It's unrelated to the business conference that I was at, and come there. And there I was at the Marriott in a conference room, and worship was being sung. And the man leading the event said, I just want everybody, as the music's playing, he gets on the mic and says, I want everybody to close their eyes. He goes, I feel the presence of God. Just close your eyes and just ask for him to reveal himself. And sure enough, Jesus was standing in front of me. I felt his presence.
Wow.
With my eyes closed, I could see the image. I could see the light. I felt the comfort of his arms, and it was amazing. There's a whole nother side story to that. I won't go into too much detail. None of us really knew each other. We had just met. We all showed up to this conference. Some people knew each other from the business that I was there for, but the woman next to me, who I just met, the day before, was sitting next to me. And so when I opened my eyes after being in the presence of Jesus, she was on the ground in convulsions, and she was wearing a dress, and she didn't, there was no thought about modesty. So that's how I know she wasn't acting, because even a woman, if they're acting, they will try to cover themselves up. That was not happening. And we just moved chairs, and some people came over, they laid hands on her, praying over her 45 minutes. And she began screaming, and this voice, she had a very sweet, woman voice, but that's not what was coming out of her on the ground. Like, the demons were coming out of her. And I'm very suspicious of things. And, this was real.
I've seen it. There
were other people there, and I can bring them, introduce. I said that the other people were there witnessing, because they had 2 or 3 other people doing the same thing. These people didn't know each other, unrelated. This wasn't something that was set up. It was just a last minute thing. And here I was I felt the presence of Jesus while people were trying to rid themselves of the evil that was in them. And my life has been changed ever since. I flew home a few hours later in the days, and then my life began to change. COVID hits. So this wasn't that long ago. COVID hits. I meet my wife at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, in line waiting for an event to see Charlie Kirk. And we'd never in any other life would have ever ran into each other. She's Persian, former Muslim, FBI spy essentially for the government for many years. Her living in Beverly Hills was not anything close to where I grew up in La Mirada, California, 2 completely different worlds. And God put us together for a reason. We now do a devotional podcast together. We have a ministry called Resurrect Ministry. It was started with, at least for me, the change had come to me making a decision for Christ. We have to make the decision to have a relationship with Christ. And then life begins to change. My anxieties go away. Any bouts with depression that I had, the illness of mental illness began to go away. It doesn't mean that I don't have bad days. You know, one of my favorite scriptures I just want to read, and that this kind of comes into mind with what we were talking about with what's been happening lately with Charlie Kirk, who we felt we kind of knew because we saw him, and Hedy actually met him. But James 1:2-4, which is my favorite verse, I feel it's my life verse. It's consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kind, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. And the reason I love that is because I had created my own trials, but as I accept Jesus Christ, new trials, demonic attacks, as I go into school boards and try to change what's happening in our schools. And I prayed once in a school board meeting and out loud, and people began to yell, "Arrest him. You must arrest him. He can't do that in here." And they sounded like animals, like demons, with their moaning and groaning. And again, more people were there and heard the very same thing that I did. And then in my prayer, I said, "Jesus Christ," again, and the room went silent. And
It's amazing. You can't
yes.
believe it until you experience the power and authority of the living God at work in the voice, in the lives of those who have strength and courage to rise up and speak up and persevere and
So I hope I addressed
displace.
your question properly, but that's kind of the road.
Yeah, that's it. No, you addressed it beautifully. It's just the reality of what you're talking about is hard to swallow, but easy to believe, because to some extent we're seeing the work of the supernatural work of darkness that is upon us because of portals we've opened. The fragmentation of the family, which is the next thing I wanted to discuss with you, the family is a primary sphere of government. The soul of a man is, right? We direct, regulate, control, restraint, and the innermost working of our being. That's a primary sphere of government. But the primary institution is three, not surprisingly: the family, the church, and the state. And this is a universal principle. We see this in hieroglyphics since the beginning of time, that those are divine institutions woven into the tapestry and the anatomy of what makes us human. We will establish these things. Everything else in between, the turning points, the rest, and all this, that's all fluff. And so going to the heart of the matter, which is the innermost workings of our deepest convictions, that's where the promise of rest and the gift of freedom is given. And you, by God's grace, not only were able to hear that voice, respond to it, and access it, but you literally had an encounter with Jesus, number one. Number two is you immediately focused on your family and understood the consequence and the implications of that. Where? In the family. And you were in a church, sick in the body of Christ, in the church. But then where has your sphere and your influence taken you? To spheres of government and speaking to power. And I think that's so powerful and it's so refreshing about you both and Hedy. And I can't wait for the event. October 9th, we have a big event coming, Rest and Recover America, providentially, right? Even the strong can grow weary and faint. But those who rest, who step into this desire to reconcile the conflict within ourselves, we're going to run and not grow weary. We're going to be able to stand in the darkness and be fearless in it. And that's really the story of Charlie, because he knew that near God, with God, was the safest place to be. And that is unfailing love. And I think your story is so powerful and your encounters with the Lord are so meaningful, because I think our listening audience right now has encountered those things and has seen those things. But sometimes there's those intrusive voices that you're crazy. That didn't happen. Don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to believe you, or you're going to lose your job. You're going to lose your position. You're going to lose the deal, right? You need that deal to close to support your family. And I guess your story is so meaningful to me because I think put it all on the table. And
When people give me that excuse, because I have people, because I do another show called the Andy Falco Show, where I talk about what's happening in our school district locally. Other people see it, of course, because it goes out on the internet. But I'll see teachers and other parents at the grocery store at Vaughn's or Stater Brothers or at Costco or at the gym. And they come up to me and they say, I really appreciate what you are doing. Thank you for going to the school board meetings. Thank you for telling us what's going on. Thank you for standing up. I can't do that. And then they go on to tell me why they can't do it. It has to do with the job, or that my wife doesn't agree with me, or my husband doesn't agree with me, or my family will never talk to me again. And I go, and I just want to say, I don't understand. My kids have told me a couple times that they said, Dad, could you not do that? Because, my friends can see and that kind of stuff. And then I have to explain to them. I said, this is important. This is an attack on our family. This is an attack on you.
on humanity, because it's an attack on truth.
And by the time I'm done, they generally understand and said, okay, I understand. And I just thought that's what I did as a police officer. My job as a police officer was to stand between people while they were sleeping and evil. My job was to catch somebody before they harm somebody if I could. But if I couldn't, then it was to locate, identify the evil so that they didn't harm anybody else. And so I don't understand when parents, fathers in particular, and I'm sorry, fathers, but I often have got on and I show up to a school board meeting and I'm in a room full of women, mothers and grandmothers and aunts. And I said, where are the fathers? It makes no sense to me. We're supposed to be there. There should be a majority of fathers there, not a minority of fathers there, protecting their kids from what's going on in our schools, because it is demonic. It is harmful. We saw it in one of our daughters. She was affected by it and almost killed her.
What happened? Do you mind sharing that?
No, I've gotten permission. And when I met Hedia, her daughter was 13 at the time, 14, and she was going through some difficulties. She had been convinced by people through the internet and at the school she was going to that she was in the wrong body, that she wasn't a girl, that she was a boy. And she believed them. She also believed that there are 50 different genders. And she would try to explain to us what these other genders were. And I could go through the list of all the things that were other than man and woman, but you know what I'm talking about. There's just so many of them. And Hetty and I would look at each other and go, what are you talking about? And so we chose not to accept it. We rested on God. We prayed, told her the truth about God's creation. And we were created in his image. And we didn't give up. And it was a long battle. It wasn't just a couple of weeks. It was years. Alcohol got involved. Drugs got involved. We eventually pulled her out of the school, the public school that she was in, El Dorado High School here in Placentia, and just shut her in her room and homeschooled her. We would, give her some freedom every so often. She showed progress, but then something would happen that would take that freedom away. But we never gave up. We never stopped praying. Hedia took her to a church called Battle Cry, where she was prayed over. And it seems that may have been one of several things that we did that really made the difference. And over a period of time, she began to go to church with us at Calvary Chapel, East Anaheim, connected with a pastor, Pastor Josh, and other amazing leadership over there. And as time went on, I eventually was able to baptize her there at Calvary Chapel, East Anaheim. But it was faith that made the difference. It was Jesus, the power of God and the Holy Spirit, not, any kind of drugs or anything else. That was the thing that made the difference.
Wow.
But it was a long road. So I know the evils of what happens in schools and social media.
Wow. You have an incredible story. You have a noteworthy life, because so many narratives in your personal life speak to our common experiences, I think, the common experiences of a generation. And for years, I've talked about creating a culture of honor. And I think you speak about a shield of honor, and you have a program for men. Did I speak about that correctly, Andy?
It was close. It was Shield of Valor is the name of the book.
Valor. Okay.
And
It was my culture of honor, your shield of valor. Okay.
Well, honor, it's an acronym, Shield of Valor. And honor is the shield. So you were very close.
In the next segment, Andy, if you don't mind, I'd like our listening audience to know how to contact you, how to leverage your life's work on the myriad of resources you have online. But I would specifically like you to address in the next segment, if you could, this concept of the shield of valor, because I think that's what it's going to take to create a culture of honor. And I think this is a turning point in our lives, and we have a tremendous opportunity to do that.
We hope listening to this episode has brought you closer to experiencing the freedom of wholeness and healing. If you have questions or comments about today's episode, or for updates about R.E.S.T, please visit our Instagram or Facebook at The Place of R.E.S.T. If you would like more information about Virginia, or to support and join the cause of R.E.S.T, please go to theplaceofrest.com/donate or call 949-289-5935. Thank you for listening to R.E.S.T with Virginia Dixon. We'll see you next week.